Welcome very much to our to everyone to our conference and AGM. Katie, I think we can stop sharing the slides for a minute because I'll just do a bit of a hello and an intro. My name is Bridget Young, and I'm really delighted to have you all here today for our conference and annual general meeting for 2022. Although still a little bit sad that we couldn't be together in person in Leicester, but to be honest, I am just delighted to share any time I can with you in whatever shape or form. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping today is that we're not expecting a fire alarm. So if you hear one, oh, sorry, those are my old notes. Bit of a dad joke there. No, in terms of proper housekeeping for today, as you will have, you've already pretty much all done it, so thank you for that. But we've just asked if everyone can put their name and the organization that they're representing on their Zoom profile. As you will have seen in the joining instructions, we will be recording the sessions. They won't go on the public part of our website. They will go to attendees and will be on the members area of our website for members to see later. But if you don't want to be recorded, feel free to keep your cameras off. And if you don't want your name recorded either, feel free to just put the name of your organization that's on. Just let me know if anything goes wrong and I can tether to my phone. Typical. Just in terms of other housekeeping, we will we've got some time for Q&A throughout the day, but please put your questions in the chat as you go. As you think of them, put your questions in the chat. Our colleague Hannah Gurnham will be managing the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many as possible throughout the day, and if we can't get to them today, we'll come to you individually. If you would prefer to say your question, some people don't like to type them. If you could put a Q in the chat box. We've been given some good advice that actually it's a bit easier to manage in a big Zoom meeting to see sort of a queue. And again, what we're trying to do is come to you to ask your question verbally when we have the Q&A section. And if we don't have time for that, both for the morning session and the afternoon session, I'll be staying on for at least 10 minutes on the Zoom link, so I can be sure to take your question in person. Just another thing which I think we've told all the speakers, but just for the speakers, if you could make sure to keep your cameras on when you're doing your presentations, even if you're sharing a screen and have some slides up or another image up. Again, we've been given some good advice that in terms of accessibility, it makes it much easier if people can see the person speaking to the camera and follow them in that way as well. So if we can ask speakers to do that, that would be great. If we can, Katie, if we could go back to sharing slides to the agenda bit, that would be lovely. So you would have received hopefully very detailed agenda in your joining instructions, but just as a reminder that what we're doing now this morning is the impact report launch and AGM section. There will be then a screen break. You've then got your workshops, which you've all signed up to and should have the Zoom links. And then another screen break, and then our final online plenary session on what what the future of hosting is. We obviously know that organizations, you can go back, Katie, sorry, organizations interested in delivering hosting will be attending that session, but we really welcome everyone to attend that as well. Katie, can you go back to the agenda slide? Thanks. We will be, not to worry, we will be, part of the discussion in the afternoon will also be looking at what role hosting could and should play in the welcome, support and often lifeline that we present to, offer people facing destitution. I just want to say a quick thank you here to the staff team and to all our partners and members who are contributing to various sessions. A big thank you for your flexibility and adaptability and just rolling with the punches as we shifted from an in-person to an online event last week. So a big thank you to everyone. just as a final note that, as I say, Hannah, our colleague Hannah Gurnham, will be managing the chat box during the day. If you have any questions throughout the day, please feel free to either put them in the chat box or to direct message either Hannah or our colleague Angela Stapley. Ange, and do message Ange, particularly if you've got any questions about what workshops you were supposed to have signed up to, or if you're a full member and you're not sure if you should be voting or not. Ange is on trustee voting watch today. So do make sure to direct message colleagues if you've got any questions throughout the session. I think that's all the sort of housekeeping and introducing the session. A final note, you'll see there that there's our hashtag and our Twitter handle, so do feel free to tweet during the day for as long as we're still all on Twitter, but that's a discussion for another day. Thanks, Katie. Can you go to the next slide? So I'm just a final little quick bit from me as we go into giving you some headlines from our impact report, which is online now, and we'll share the link at the end of the session. And the only bit really from me is a big thank you and what a busy year. I've now been at NACCOM nearly a year and a half, so I'm starting to get the inkling that I'll be saying that every year. Phew, what a busy year. But it really has felt like an intense year for all of us, both, for NACCOM with the launch of our new strategy, our design lab work and BBC Radio 4 charity appeal, for all of us around the crises in Afghanistan and Ukraine and the government response to that, the passing of the Nationality and Borders Act, and the wider context of, working within a hostile environment, moving out of COVID, the cost of living crisis, and instability in government. So I think just a big thank you from us to everyone who has really contributed to a really busy and impactful year. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Tom, who's going to do highlights from the network development update.
Yeah, hi everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom McPherson, one of NACCOM's network development coordinators, and the other two network development coordinators being Paul and Katie. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the network development team's work over the past year. So next slide, please, Katie. Thanks. So yeah, as Bridget's already mentioned, there have obviously been some fresh challenges to support members to navigate over the past year. So yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been supporting members' response and adaptation of services to navigate emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, the situations in Afghanistan and Ukraine have raised further fresh challenges for members. So in particular, the situation in Ukraine and the government's response with their Homes for Ukraine scheme led to us very quickly holding a thematic members hub with hosting organizations to discuss and coordinate our response to the Homes for Ukraine scheme. And that in turn very quickly led to us expanding upon our range of good practice resources, toolkits, and information, particularly with 2 new hosting guides aimed at supporting prospective and current hosts, as well as organizations and authorities supporting and facilitating hosting schemes. Also, the rising cost of living is, of course, adding further challenges to members. So we've been supporting members to manage with that challenge, which has been adding significant pressure to service provision and the sector more widely. So we've been exploring strategies for improving and sustaining projects, as well as more recently coming out with a new resource listing tips and funding opportunities to help members to manage in the current difficult context. And finally, also the Nationality and Borders Act has raised further uncertainty because of uncertainty over the implementation of the Act. So we've been supporting members to navigate that challenge, and will continue to do so as the Act is implemented. And there have been some changes to the network over the past year. Sorry, Katie, just staying on that slide for now. There have been a couple of changes. So there've been a slight reduction in full members, but also an increase in associate members. And that's kind of down to a few factors. So some members have ceased to deliver certain services, and there's also been some mergers between certain members. And of course, when you have two members merging and becoming one organization, that leads to an automatic reduction in the overall number of members. And we have seen a number of new membership applications, particularly from the homelessness sector, but most of those new membership applications have been coming from organisations that aren't currently providing accommodation to destitute people seeking asylum. So of course, they've become associate members, but on the other hand, a number of the new associate members do have plans in place to start providing accommodation to that client group. So we do expect to see some new associate members becoming full members in the not too distant future. Next slide, please, Katie. And another project we've been working on a lot in the past year is the Design Lab. So this was essentially a program of external support to help us to improve our service delivery to members. And we used this as an opportunity to carry out in-depth research with members to find out how members feel about NACCOM, what we're doing well, and where there may be room for improvement. So starting with the more positive, the really positive feedback, we actually got incredibly positive feedback from members in terms of our enabling and facilitating solidarity, collaboration, learning, sharing, and connection. So that's something we're immensely proud of, because those are really values that we hold dear and which we feel are essential to a thriving network. But also we want to take from the more constructive feedback and learn from it. So just to highlight a few findings and how we're responding, members told us that networking and solidarity are vital. As I already mentioned, we're already doing a lot to provide opportunities for solidarity and networking, but we also know that there's more that we can do. So we are dedicated and committed to providing more in-person events going forward. And our next round of regional hubs in early 2023 will be held in person in various locations across the country. And we've also recently sent out information to our members outlining our wellbeing support package, which we also feel is as an essential part of solidarity, looking out for one another's wellbeing. Members also told us that targeted, timely, and relevant content works best. So in that regard, we're going to be launching a new NACCOM Slack community with channels dedicated to service types and topics. So for example, there will be a separate channel for hosting and a separate channel for housing, among a number of other channels. And that will enable members to really receive and send targeted communication according to their needs and interests. Members also told us that a diverse network needs diverse resources. So as well as the resources that we've already added this year, so the 2 hosting guides, we're actually currently working on a new toolkit which will really highlight what members can do to work with housing associations, as well as what housing associations can do themselves to better support destitute people seeking asylum, as well as people with NRPF more broadly. And finally, members also mentioned that the website needs more improvement. And this is actually something that's been on our radar for a while, but we also know that we know there's more we can do, but we did get a lot of positive feedback in terms of the content of the website. So most of the constructive feedback was really around making that content more accessible and making the website more user-friendly going forward. So we're committed to redesigning our website and are planning to do that in 2023. Watch this space in terms of the website. And moving on to my final slide, one of the things we've been working on a lot recently and will continue to do so moving forward is regional partnership working to create pathways out of destitution. So we've been following, supporting, and learning from various members who are proactively developing innovative strategic partnerships to bring an end to destitution. And just to highlight one partnership that some of our members are engaged in is Fairway Scotland, which is a collective approach involving the Scottish Government, local authorities, people with lived experience, and voluntary sector organisations, as I mentioned, including a number of NACCOM members. So moving forward, we're going to be learning from projects just like Fairway Scotland, as well as other projects around the network, and our own experiences in building consensus and cross-sector collaboration to really more proactively share and facilitate partnership working throughout the network. So yeah, we're really looking forward to working with members more going forward in terms of partnership building. And that's all from me for now. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague Hannah to talk to you about the external affairs work.
Thanks very much, Tom. Hi, everyone. Really great to see you all. Yeah, I'm Hannah Gurnham. I'm NACCOM's Communications Coordinator, and I'll be giving you a brief update on our external affairs work this year, which includes some key highlights from our policy, advocacy and communications work. So NACCOM has sought to raise our collective voice on a range of important issues this year. As Bridget said at the beginning, the Nationality and Borders Bill, which, as we know, passed into law in spring, did dominate much of our external affairs work during the year. We played an active role, as did many of our members, in the Together with Refugees coalition, which brought hundreds of organisations from across the sector and beyond together to campaign against key parts of the bill and to highlight the damaging impact it poses to refugees in the UK. We also worked with partners and members on a few key aspects to evidence and highlight increased risks of destitution and homelessness to people in the asylum system as a result of the bill. And since it passed into law, we have pledged our support to continue fighting the bill with others in the sector as the bill is enacted, using our collective voice as a network, and also evidence from the network too. The war in Ukraine and the subsequent launch of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, as you've heard a bit of already, was another priority for us in terms of external affairs. We advocated for key improvements to Homes for Ukraine, coordinating with hosting organisations in the network to share expertise and insights directly with the government and government ministers, partners and the wider public, calling for additional support, safeguards, funding and a good practice approach. As you'll hear shortly, our work on finding local solutions to homelessness developed significantly during the year, and we worked with Homeless Link and others, and our volunteer community researchers who you'll hear from, to highlight and advocate for improved support pathways for people with NRPF at a local level, and also to kind of extend understanding of what NRPF actually is. And finally, we continue to develop platforms and opportunities for people with lived experience within the network to share and amplify evidence and experiences of destitution through our community research programme, but also through advocacy and media work, including a destitution framing and messaging project with partners IMIX. And many of you will be attending the workshop on that this afternoon, and we'll hear more there. Thanks, Katie. Just to briefly touch on our media work from across the year. So this presented both challenges and opportunities. The bulk of our media work did centre on Homes for Ukraine. Whilst there undoubtedly were issues with the scheme, it was also an opportunity to publicly highlight the value and positive experiences of hosting as a vital pathway out of destitution for refugees. And that was the focus of a lot of our media work. And hosting, the profile of hosting was raised significantly, not just because of Homes for Ukraine, but previously in relation to the crisis in Afghanistan. And that led to a huge increase in interest in hosting and hosting inquiries through our website. So we had over 400 people expressing an interest, and we worked with members to kind of convert that interest into hosting opportunities. However, the unacceptable differential treatment of refugees based on their nationality and the urgent need for safe routes for all refugees was obviously something that was very important for us to highlight in media coverage, and we endeavoured to do that. And then finally, last slide, please. You might recall, so around this time last year in October, we had our BBC Radio 4 charity appeal, which was hosted by the wonderful Lord Alf Dubs and was broadcast on World Homelessness Day in October. So a year on from that campaign, and we're delighted to share that the appeal was really successful. So we exceeded our target of £20,000 by quite some way. We generated just over £42,000. The appeal obviously raised that money, but it was really crucial in raising awareness of NACCOM, of our work, of hosting, because the story focused on hosting, and also just kind of generating wider understanding of destitution in the asylum system. And we consulted with members about what those funds should go on, and the whole sort of 42,000 plus amount is being used on a couple of key areas identified by members as areas of support. So that's help with fundraising and also kind of wellbeing support, and we're rolling those things out at the moment. And just a quick note to wrap up to say that we're always really grateful for partners, supporters, members who share our work, who join our campaigns, and who sort of get on board with everything that we're doing, and hope that continues. So that's all from me. Thank you. Oh, and I think I'm handing over now to the community researchers and Nico, who's going to introduce the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. And hello, everyone. It's Nico here, and one of the NACCOM researchers. First, before I start, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. And secondly, English is not my first language. Please, if you don't hear what I'm saying, Google it or ask me to repeat myself. Thank you. So yes, the Community Research Program was established in March 2021. aims to provide space for people with lived experience of immigration control to research, analyze, present solutions to destitution in our communities. I don't know about this slide. I can't see it proper, so I'm going to read in my paper. Maybe it's better. So I'm on the, sorry, because the slides, I can't see it proper, so I'm going to do it again. Can I start again, please? If you don't mind. You already know my name, that's fine. So community researcher, I'm a community researcher, I'm part of the community researchers in NACCOM, community researcher, sorry. So today we are going to talk about NACCOM's community research program. The community research program was established in March 2021. Our aim is to provide a space for people with lived experience of immigration control to research, analyze, and present solutions to destitution in our communities. It's part of NACCOM's commitment to empower people in the network who are destitute, to raise awareness of the impact of destitution, and be part of making change to improve the situation for people who experience immigration control in the UK. I was going to say next slide, please, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to just read it myself. Sorry about that. The common research team is made up of 6 people located across the country and with different backgrounds, but united by having had challenges with migration control. We are volunteers who participate in a design and a lead research work at NACCOM. As a group, we discuss the areas of destitution, homelessness, and migration that we wish to collectively research, and NACCOM supports us to enable, sorry, I don't know, it's written here. It's a disaster on my side, don't worry. The ethical impactful research. We meet on a fortnightly basis via Zoom, working with a facilitator. Our sessions include different training to prepare us for the research, including research methods, communications, well-being skills, and research ethics. NACCOM provides help to enable us to participate. As a community researchers with lived experience, we have some shared experiences, but also challenges that are specific to us individually. NACCOM covers equipment, childcare if needed, data cost, and support with checkleading to make sure researchers can engage fully. We worked with Homeless Link on their report, Unlocking the Door, published in June 2022. On experience of homelessness, non-UK nationalists access support from local authorities. Throughout 2022, we have been working on our own research project, looking into the experiences of people with unsuccessful asylum claims and improving support towards settling status. But before I pass it to my colleague, I just want to apologize about this bump ahead because, even my paper is like written for small words, but I hope you heard what I was saying. But if you want me to repeat something, please, I can do that. If it's not, I will pass it to my colleague, Kaz. Kaz is going to be talking about a review of the program. So please, Kaz, I hand over for you. Good luck.
Thank you, Nico. My name is Kaz, and I'm one of the community researchers. And I'm going to talk about the 6-month review we had. Being part of the development of a lived experience community research program has been really positive experience. For me, being part of a project which works to make change is really empowering, rather than relying on other people to make change for you. Before I started with NACCOM, I had very low confidence and did not understand the system. Therefore, I didn't feel I had the control over my life and my situation. Getting involved with NACCOM has helped me to build confidence and understand my situation better so I can take on the challenges I face. However, it is also a challenging process. As a researchers, with lived experience of immigration control, we are dealing with issues that we have experience of and can be very difficult for us. We also have challenges in our lives which can make engagement more difficult. In order to ensure the community researcher program was fulfilling its aims, we conducted a 6-month review, which was published in June 2022. The review engaged community researchers, NACCOM staff, and representatives from partner organizations and had 4 key aims. 1, identifying the strength and success for the CR program. 2, identify areas for improvement of the CR program. 3, identify opportunities for the program that can be of benefit to the community researchers and can further NACCOM's work. 4, create a coherent and structured plan for the future of the program. Next slide, please. Thank you. We learned a lot from our 6-month review, and we only have time to cover a few points here. So I would encourage everyone to read the full review. A key success of the program was that we have built a really strong, safe, well-integrated and mutually supportive group who have got to know each other well. We have shared experience, and we have the same goal, and we have same desire to achieve it. One thing we have learned is that it's really important to offer adequate support to enable people to participate. As people with lived experience, we sometimes have challenging circumstances, and it's really important that there is emotional and practical support in place from staff who understand our situation. Another key learning point was that all community researchers said their main motivation for getting involved was to create change. There was a really strong desire to conduct research that was impactful and created a basis for change. Community researchers said that the collaboration with Homeless Link was positive, but the scope of our involvement was limited, and we wanted to conduct our own fieldwork on the areas of immigration and destitution that we think it's important to research. That leads to the development of our current research project, which Anne will talk about. Thank you.
Thanks, Cass.
Anne, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Cass. This is me, Anne. I'm one of the committee researchers, and I'll talk about our current project, the research project. Thank you. Building on learning from the review, in the last year, we have undertaken a participatory research project into the experience of people who have received negative asylum decisions and improving support towards settling status. Community researchers supported by NACCOM's Community Research Facilitator have led on every stage of the process with an emphasis on shared decision-making in the design and delivery of research. Through our fortnightly group sessions, we collaboratively decided on a research topic, reviewed the literature, and formed research question. Next slide, please. Thank you. We collectively decided that the aim of our research was to understand the experience of people who have had an unsuccessful asylum claim and explore how support can be best provided by third sector and community groups towards settling their status. To achieve this aim, we developed these 3 research questions. Number 1, what are the experience of people who have made an asylum claim after a negative decision from the Home Office? What are the practical and personal impacts of being subject to this decision? Then the second question was, what are the practical and personal barriers that people in this situation can face to engaging with and responding to negative decisions from the Home Office, including the appeal process? The third question was, how can third sector, voluntary and community groups best support people in this situation towards settling their status? Next slide, please. Regarding the research delivery, community researchers visited NACCOM members across the country and conducted 27 in-depth semi-structured interviews with participants who have their asylum claim refused. It has been difficult doing this work as we are listening to the similar stories, having flashbacks because we have lived those experiences ourselves. It brought some painful memories back from our own challenges in the past. I found it more painful hearing the stories during and after COVID, like post-COVID days. The difficulties were getting worse for many people. We have now analyzed the data and have begun the process of working collaboratively to write up our findings and recommendations. The full report and findings will be launched in early 2023. Please watch this space for our launch event. Thank you very much for listening. I'll hand over to Leon now.
Thank you so much, Anne, and the other community research as well. It's so good to hear about the development of the project, something I really enjoy working on personally as well. So good morning, everyone. I'm Leon, the Policy and Research Coordinator at NACCOM, and I'm going to talk a bit about the annual survey. Just to say that NACCOM is so grateful to everyone who was able to complete the survey this year, appreciating what a busy and stressful time it was for everyone, particularly over the summer when the survey was live. We've been busy analysing all of the responses that we received, and we're now ready to share some findings with you all. So if you have any questions about the data when I work through it all, drop them in the chat and we can get to them during the Q&A. So next slide, please. And another slide, please. So to start, and just for those that might not be aware of the survey, each year we survey our members, asking about the services that they provide in the previous 12 months. Typically, we've only opened this survey up to 4 members. That's those that provide accommodation services. But this was the first year that we also asked questions to associate members as well. That's the members that don't provide accommodation, but provide other support services. So we are really interested in understanding this year the full scale of support on offer across the NACCOM network, and to also identify areas of the UK where the NACCOM network was less active, which is perhaps even more relevant considering developments around full dispersal and around accommodation centres as well. Also, there was some separate work ongoing around refining the survey and making sure that the data we're getting was given an accurate as possible picture of migrant homelessness as possible. So this year we asked members to be a bit more specific in the data that they reported, so as not to kind of report data relating to wider non-migrant homelessness figures, even if this would kind of reduce the overall figures that we got as a whole. Next slide, please. So just to touch on the whole NACCOM membership to start. So as of June 2022, when we launched the survey, there were 137 members. That's 73 full members and 64 associate members. Next slide, please. And we had 85 responses to the annual survey. That's 55 full members and 30 associate members. So it's important to remember that the annual survey is just a snapshot of the network's work as a whole. And whilst it pulls out some clear trends of what we see going on, the data presented is likely just the tip of the iceberg in terms of migrant homelessness and destitution, both within the network and outside as well. So this year we did have a slightly lower response rate than last year when 66 full members responded. So it is important to bear that in mind when considering the data that we see. Next slide, please. So moving on to the some of the key headline findings from the survey data. Members reported providing 333,845 nights of accommodation to 2,281 people across the past 12 months period. So this was a slight reduction from last year when around 2,800 people were accommodated. And this lower figure does speak to the slightly lower response rate. It also reflects some organisational change that we saw in what was quite a challenging year. So it's a year where we saw the closure of some key services. We also saw some mergers and some members either transitioning or in the process of transitioning from one accommodation type to the other. And that's something I'm sure that we'll touch on a bit later. Nonetheless, the breakdown of the people that the NACCOM network supported as a whole was very similar to previous years, with a few quite interesting changes. So of the 2,281 people accommodated, 748, or around a third, were people with a refused asylum claim. This is a minor reduction from last year, but it's still the most frequently accommodated group. The second most frequently accommodated group across the network were people with refugee status, who made up 29% of all people accommodated. So this is quite a rise on last year, when refugees made up only 1/5 of the total. People with NRPF who had not claimed asylum were made up 9% of all people accommodated, and a majority of these were from outside of the EEA. And so that brought the total of people across the network accommodated with NRPF to 42%. And then at least 6% of people accommodated by the network were supported via the Homes to Ukraine scheme. And the remaining 29% were from this other category, which is children or adults that didn't fit the categories. And that section there, the other section, is slightly lower, or is significantly lower than previous years. And I think that speaks to us asking our members to be a bit more specific about the data that they reported. Next slide, please. So in our survey, we asked members to detail where people they accommodated were before they were housed. This year, we learned that people most frequently came from places of insecure or informal accommodation at 43%. Just under a third came from home office accommodation, and 11% were rough sleeping. We saw smaller numbers of people entering member support from local authority temporary accommodation, council housing, detention, private rental sector, and the national referral mechanism, and that makes up the remaining 16%. And the main takeaway here is we saw a major rise in the number of people in need of support having left home office accommodation. So this year, of the people that the network supported, 431 came directly from home office accommodation, compared to just 140 last year. So that's triple the figure. This is possibly aligned with the rising number of refugees being accommodated across the network, and it might also be linked to, for example, people in the Afghan resettlement scheme potentially leaving hotels. But it's something we'll be digging deeper into with the data in the future, and we're really interested to hear about how this reflects changes you've seen in member services as well. Next slide, please. Of course, we do also track or ask members to record where people moved on from their services and where they went to. So this year, 329 people moved on from member projects. We saw more people this year moving on with some form of leave to remain. So this year, 109 people were granted some form of leave to remain whilst being accommodated by members, which is brilliant. And that's significantly higher than last year's figure of 69. However, the overall most frequent move on outcome, once again, was to Section 4 support, with 137 people. However, this figure was lower than last year. This may partly be due to COVID. So we saw a particularly high number of people with positive move-ons to Section 4 claims in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID, and it now appears to have returned to usual service. However, we also know that delays in home office decision-making, particularly around Section 4 applications, continue to prolong move on into asylum accommodation, and this might have had an effect as well. So next slide, please. So in the survey, we also ask members to share data on those that they were unable to support. So this year, we know that 1,107 people approached members for support, but were not able to be accommodated. And this obviously speaks to the continued high demand for the accommodation seen across the network. Again, the most stark change was the increase in demand from people leaving home office accommodation, which nearly tripled between this year and last year. And again, this really drives home the need for more robust support and accommodation for people leaving the asylum accommodation system and asylum accommodation provided by the Home Office. And finally, 4 members were able to provide destitution payments and financial support to 1,325 people that they didn't accommodate. And obviously this is a vital lifeline for many people, and the network was once again able to support a significant number of people in this capacity, even if they weren't able to accommodate them. Next slide, please. So you can see on this side the different types of accommodation offered across the network. So we had survey responses from 21 members delivering hosting schemes, 31 delivering housing and property schemes, and 21 delivering night shelters and emergency provision. With the ongoing impact of COVID-19, we saw members continue to adapt their services and the accommodation types that they provided. So as with last year, the overall picture in terms of capacity and provision is quite mixed. So as you can see, housing and property schemes remain the main type of accommodation provided across the network. However, this was a year where hosting grew. So 700 people were accommodated in hosting schemes this year, more than double last year's figures. We also saw a rise in the number of hosts. And of course, this reflects the easing in COVID-19 restrictions across the reporting period, with people feeling more comfortable to return to hosting. But it is worth noting that both the number of hosts and the number of people hosting haven't yet returned to pre-pandemic levels, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that this afternoon. It was also a really interesting year for emergency provision, because as you can see there, we saw a significant reduction from last year in the number of people supported in night shelters and other forms of emergency provision. We saw this continued shift towards single bed hostel and hotel accommodation, and for the second year in a row, there was a reduction in the number of shelters across the network. So this year, a couple of the largest emergency accommodation projects weren't operated, which reduced the overall number of people accommodated. But we also think that this year's figures provide a bit of a closer depiction of the total number of people seeking asylum, refugees and migrants with NRPF housed in emergency accommodation across the network. Because as I mentioned, we encourage members to be a bit more stricter about the data they reported and not include wider homelessness data, which was often more likely to be included in data on night shelter type accommodation than it was in other forms of accommodation provided. Next slide, please. So moving on to look at staff and network capacity across the network. Across all survey respondents, there were 1,477 staff reported, and the number of staff in accommodation projects, 346, marked a minor drop-off from last year, but relatively stable. There was perhaps a more significant fall-off in the number of volunteers in accommodation projects, which fell for the second year running. So some of the larger more volunteer-intensive projects weren't open this year or last year, and this figure speaks to the continued impact of COVID-19 on services, but that members were able to continue and adapt their services through COVID with less volunteer support is really testament to the resilience of members and the network as a whole. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, people with lived experience of homelessness and destitution in the asylum system played an increasing role in member service delivery. So compared to last year, more members had people with lived experience at the director and senior management level, on the board of directors and trustees, employed at a non-senior level, and volunteering in service delivery. Next slide, please. So to move on to look at some of the non-accommodation support across the network that we introduced in the survey this year. Going back to financial support, you can see that the network as a whole was able to provide support to 3,822 people with either financial support and destitution payments. And the split between full and associate members here was around 50-50, and 691 people received financial support and accommodation from members, so part of that holistic support package. Next slide, please. And of course, talking about the holistic support package, access to good legal and immigration advice is immensely important for a person's chances of being able to move out of destitution and settle in their status. And this was a year where legal advice capacity within the network grew, which is great. So across the network, that's both full and associate members, 40 organizations reported offering legal routes out of destitution, either with in-house immigration advice or with some sort of referral relationship with a local provider. Meanwhile, in the past year, at least four full members in the network developed in-house OIS capacity, bringing the number of members offering both accommodation and in-house legal and immigration advice to 16, which is brilliant. We also saw the number of accommodation providers with OISC level 1, level 2, and level 3 advice capacity all rise across the year, which is brilliant as well. Of course, we've seen some of the benefits of more people having this holistic support offer with the increase in the number of people gaining leave to remain across the network, which is great to see. So next slide, please. And now finally, this year, for the first time, we asked all survey respondents about their support needs, asking them to choose the 3 for which there was the greatest need in their local area. So despite the great progress in improving legal casework capacity across the network, it's no surprise that it was still ranked the #1 need by members. So 79% of respondents identified it as a top 3 need. This was followed by a clear need for more emotional and mental health support, which was chosen by 57% of respondents, and more destitution support, selected by 49%. This speaks to the sheer number of people approaching the network for support, and it's particularly pertinent in the context of the wider energy and cost of living crisis as well around destitution support need. So finally, just to conclude, apologies for being a bit of a crash course this morning, but a number of hosts and people hosted rose following that large drop-off last year. However, it's still a very uncertain landscape as we wait to see if we can return to those pre-COVID levels. This was a year where legal capacity across the network grew, including the number of organisations delivering both accommodation and in-house legal advice. However, the survey is a reminder about that the capacity of the network continues to be stretched in terms of both properties available and also the number of staff and volunteers. And final slide. Fortunately, this year we did see more guests leaving projects with leave to remain, which is amazing. However, in terms of patterns of those who are approaching us for support, we saw a significant rise in the number of refugees and also the number of people being made homeless upon leaving home office accommodation, which really speaks to that need for better support for those leaving asylum support from the home office, which obviously we've campaigned as a network for a long time for, and is really pressing considering dispersal and potential changes around accommodation centres, and also the fact that the asylum support system is obviously right now very much in the public eye. And finally, in this context, and despite the amazing work on network, there are of course still a significant number of people that our members were unable to support. So I just want to say thank you once again to everyone who completed the survey for your help and your patience. We've now looked at the data, taken stock, and we have lots of ideas for the next steps and for doing the most we can with the data we have this year. Of course, I can share these slide decks, and the data is obviously included in the impact report as well, along with some more detail. So I look forward to seeing you all in various sessions later, and happy, of course, to answer any questions in the Q&A too. So for now, I'll hand back to Bridget to wrap up this section.
Thanks very much, Leon, and to everyone else. It's a bumper course, and everything we've done this year, and particularly the highlights from the survey results, which is, I think, the real thing that gets bums on seats for this session. So thank you so much to everyone. I'm going to hand over now in a minute to our chair and vice chair, who will do the annual general meeting part of the morning. Just a reminder that this is where full members really come into their come into their own. In a minute, you'll be asked to vote for re-election of some of our trustees. You should have received a link from Ange for the voting form. If you haven't, or you're unsure if you should be voting, please do message Ange in the chat box. So I just wanted to say that before handing over to Karen and Johnny.
Morning, everybody. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about our income and expenses for the last financial year. So if you look at this income slide, basically it does show quite a drop in income, but that is not to be alarming. That's basically as a result of us having the Respond and Adapt programme in the previous year, which brought in about 700,000. So if you take that off the total, we have had around a 10% increase in income over this year. So setting aside the Respond and Adapt. Another thing to point out is the shift between restricted and unrestricted funds. What we've seen is a number of funders have moved, in part due to COVID and recognising the challenges that charities are facing. They've moved much more into offering unrestricted grants. So that's why there's quite a significant change there in the makeup of income. So from my perspective, a 10% rate of growth in income, I think, is a really healthy amount. It shows that we're still viable and funders are still supporting us. But it also is a sustainable change. A lot of charities do go through kind of like boom and bust, where they'll have a sudden expansion and then retract, and that could be quite a challenge. So I'm very pleased to see that change. In terms of the expenditure costs, or kind of what we would expect in terms of NACCOM in the last 12 months. So an increase in staffing costs, which reflects that we've had some new staff appointed and a slightly changed structure to recognise what we need now. Fundraising costs are very similar. Other activities, that's approximately 100% growth. Annual conference and events as well, that's also increased quite a bit. But generally, we're kind of in line with what we expect to be doing. And obviously, some costs around events is reduced because of the need to do them online. So there's less travel involved as well now. In terms of trustees, we've had Sharish Koya, who became a trustee last year. He's unfortunately had a change in circumstances, so he's had to step down. And also Jochen Kortlander, who was involved in the steering group that started off NACCOM before we became a CIO in 2015. So Jochen's been involved for 10 years, which is amazing. And he's also for a number of years acted as treasurer and put a lot of time and effort. So we really appreciate Jochen's contribution. So there's no new trustees that we're proposing this year. And there's 3 up for re-election, which is myself, Shukri and Washington. And because I'm one of the people up for re-election, Johnny is going to run this part of the meeting. Thanks, Johnny.
Great, thank you very much, Karen. Just to introduce myself, I'm Johnny Darling. I'm one of the trustees at NACCOM. I've been a trustee for, I think, 5 years now. And I'm the vice chair of the board of trustees. So I'm stepping in here to just coordinate the process of the re-election of trustees, hopefully. The way this will run is that hopefully all members should have received in your details for registration for the conference a link to the page for voting. It's a kind of individual vote on each of the 3 trustees that we're hoping to re-elect today. In a moment, I'm going to ask each of the three of them to spend a couple of minutes just outlining their contributions and their kind of role within the board of trustees, and then we'll have a sort of a minute or 2 pause in which members are invited to fill in that form. If you have any problems with that, or you've not received the details through registration, please contact Ange and put that into the chat. And then we'll pass on to the Q&A for the AGM, but also more generally any questions or discussion points that have come up from the earlier reports from the rest of NACCOM. So we'll have a bit of time to then collate that. The outcomes of that vote will then be presented at the end of that Q&A session. So all members and everyone on this as part of this meeting will basically be able to see the outcomes of each of those individual votes. So it should be hopefully quite a transparent process. So I'm going to hand over to each of the 3 trustees now, just to give us a minute or 2 of their time to sort of outline their role within the board, and for you then to consider if we want to re-elect them. So our first trustee is Karen, who I'm going to pass on to you now, who you just heard from. So Karen, can you give us a minute or 2 of your time? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've worked with refugees and asylum seekers since the year 2000. I've done quite a few different roles in the sector, including I was CEO of Nottingham Arimathea Trust, which is one of the members. I also, whilst working at Arimathea, I also did a master's in charity resource management and a diploma in charity accounting. Which is all really, really helpful experience as a trustee to bring in. And I've done quite a bit of work working with refugee-led community organisations, or RCOs, so supporting their development, looking at setting them up as a charity or a CIO, policy development, business plans, fundraising, all those kinds of things. I've thoroughly enjoyed my first year as chair as well, and hope that I do get voted back in so I can continue doing it. It was always a bit of a struggle to spend as much time as I wanted to with NACCOM when I was at Arimathea, and now because of working freelance, essentially, it means I have got the time to put in to supporting the team and working more closely with the Board of Trustees.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Karen. If we move on to Shukri, are you able to give us a minute of your time? Thanks, Shukri.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to join you all this morning. My name is Shukri. I've been a trustee with NACCOM for the last 3 years, and I'm also now a member of the Safeguarding Task Force. I work with Coventry Independent Advice Service. It's a charity that's trying to relieve poverty and hardship and reduce inequality within communities in Coventry. I'm also a campaigner and activist in my spare time. I've used art and culture to highlight some of the struggles that people experience in the asylum system. I've co-produced with Crisis and Refugee Action, but also amazing and talented people with lived experience. I worked with the UK City of Culture last year to deliver the Home Festival. I just wanted to kind of reflect, and this didn't happen overnight. I was once supported by one of NACCOM's members, a night shelter, to end my destitution. So it's so important, the work that NACCOM members do, and especially in this current climate where refugees and migrants are faced with hostility and the impact of cost of living crisis. I really do feel that I hope I can continue to contribute as a trustee and ensure that lived experience is at the heart of our discussions when making decisions. And also an interesting fact, maybe I'm the voice of the NACCOM animation video, if you haven't watched it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Shukri. And finally, we have Washington. Washington, are you able to give us a minute or so of your time? Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Washington Ali. I'm the chair for CAST. CAST is a charity in the we're based in Essex. It stands for Communities Sanctuary Seekers Together. We used to be Communities and Asylum Seekers Together, but we have changed that wording. We've been in operation since 2010, and the work that we have been doing with CAST has really given us that opportunity as a charity. We became a charity in 2018. We had been operating, trying to register, faced so many challenges. And since 2018, we've been operating as a charity. And I would say where we are today, we've got a 21-bed accommodation which can house HMO. We are dealing with a lot of challenges within the caste settings, modern day slavery, asylum seekers, refugee who have just been granted, and the work that we have been doing has been multiplied over and over. We've now got about 6 houses with few more houses coming. The whole aim is what NACCOM is sort of like embracing, ending destitution. So with NACCOM, I've been with NACCOM for 3 years as well, which basically means I'm now due for re-election. I've been working with the finance team, and I would say my experience with NACCOM has been amazing. Coming into NACCOM, I think I was one of the first person to work with NACCOM with the lived experience of having been an asylum seeker and it's just been an amazing. I just want to say thank you to the team that's working on the ground, the trustees, the environment. I wouldn't want to leave it for anything else. It's something that I feel I can continue to add value. We can continue as a team to make a difference in our communities and in the whole of United Kingdom to make sure we end the destitution. Apart from that, I also run my own business, a healthcare business, and we work with nurses, carers, sometimes pharmacies. So it's diversions. I've also helped some of the people with lived experience within my business. And I hope to continue doing that and grow NACCOM to a situation where we won't have any destitution in this country. So yes, I'm up for re-election, and I'm hoping that you would consider re-electing me so that we can continue with the work that we started. Many
Brilliant.
thanks.
Thank you very much, Washington. Okay, so if you, as member organisations, it's one member organisation, one vote. So hopefully you've got the link and the registration. You'll see there are options around voting, but underneath each of those options, there is also a kind of written statement around the experience and expertise of these 3 trustees as well. So again, there's kind of further information there should you need any. I think we'll pause now for a minute or so just to give you time to kind of do that, and then I'll hand back over to Bridget, I think, who's going to lead us through the next section of the agenda, which is going to focus on questions. So thanks very much for your time, and thanks to our 3 trustees for their comments. Thanks.
Katie, I wonder if we could go to the next slide while the voting's happening as well. So we had Karen jump the gun slightly in terms of waxing lyrical about Jochen. I mean, I really wanted to show my artwork. So we just wanted to, I wanted to add my thanks. I know Jochen's probably cringing, I can't find you on my screen. There you are. I wanted to add my thanks both to Shush and particularly to Jochen for all his support. And these are just, you know, some of the things that he's contributed to, but has also just been a wonderful person to kind of get to know and work with a bit. And I know that I'll get to work with him in the future as he's at Assist. But we just wanted to say a big thank you. And I also wanted to say a big thank you because it's Trustee Week, this is as well. And this is, it is genuinely a group of trustees that are supportive and passionate and insightful and knowledgeable and just really nice to work with. And I think are spoiling me for any future boards. So a big thank you, particularly to Jochen, and a massive, you know, well done, Jochen. You should be hugely proud of the impact you've had. Dramatic bow. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Bridget, to interrupt. We just
Yes.
had a couple of questions about the voting on the chat. One about can we post the link there, and the other one is the voting page live. I don't know if you're able to, or whether Ange can.
Ange, yeah.
Oh, there we go. No, I think it is live.
Yeah, it's live. There's votes coming in. And Romy, I've just sent the link again to you direct, and John also to you too. Cheers.
Great, thank you. Katie, I think we can probably take the slides down for now to do the Q&A. So everyone's sort of welcome to continue to vote as we do the Q&A. What Ange does as well is she sort of works her magic and just double checks the voting, and then we'll get the graph ready for the end so that we can be really transparent. But we thought we would have a little bit more time. We're running ahead of schedule, which again, those who know me, never happens when I'm involved. So clearly the listeners don't give me too much speaking parts. But we've got some time now for Q&A, and then we do have a sort of a lovely bit at the end that we'll hold some time before we finish on time at 11 o'clock to make sure you get proper screen break. So thank you everyone for contributions so far. Hannah, if I can maybe pass on to you to start to sort of take us through the Q&A, and really just looking to the team and to Karen and Johnny and the community researchers to be on hand to answer any of the questions.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone. There's been a couple of comments and a couple of questions in the chat. I'll just acknowledge the comments first. Ronald, who's in Scotland, said, who is a person seeking asylum, just wanted to acknowledge the kind of the power of having people with lived experience getting involved in the work, and credit to the community researchers there as well. So thank you, Ronald, for that contribution. Also, John in Leeds from LASAN just wanted to acknowledge how difficult it is with the funding landscape. So again, thank you. And I'm sure lots of people can relate to that, but thanks for putting that in the chat. And just to move on to a couple of questions, and then Karen, I'll come to you if that's okay. Paul Scotting from Host Nottingham had a question around the survey data, and specifically the question around unmet need, and that and referrals and kind of referral mechanisms not necessarily being adequate. So Leon, I wonder if you could maybe talk a bit more around this. So the specific question was, is the data around unmet need possibly an underestimate? Because in many cases, referring bodies only refer when members tell them they have capacity, and so people in need will not necessarily be referred, and plus they know, referral bodies often know the criteria for members, so the majority of destitute asylum seekers will not be referred for that reason as well. And a couple of other members, Hope at Home and One Roof Leicester, also kind of agreed on that point.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's something we were thinking a bit around with the annual survey, and obviously, how do you capture that unmet need? Because like you say, anything we record in the data is always going to be, a big underestimation of the wider context, because obviously we can only report what our members are able to see, and as you say, they're not necessarily going to be getting that in the first place because referral partners know that they're already at capacity. So I think for us, the data is useful to really contextualize the growth, I guess, over time, and what we can track. But I think we're going to have to do work outside of the survey to really get an understanding of the wider need, because I guess that it's really challenging for us to do that through the survey, and I think it's something we've tried to do. But I think it's, in terms of a piece of work for us to do, I think we're going to have to go out to members and really talk about how can we best track this and estimate, I guess, that unmet need in across the UK. We had some conversations with, I believe, so the Harriet Watt University at Edinburgh, who kind of do some of the wider kind of statistics around tracking homelessness, and particularly migrant homelessness. Had some discussions about how we can maybe contribute to that, and it's definitely one of the challenges for me to kind of take forward, and whether that's something we do, probably not something we do within the survey, because the survey is always going to be limited in that capacity, but something we do outside to really kind of provide some context, maybe take some learnings from our members and kind of feed into those wider efforts to kind of capture migrant homelessness that are ongoing, but are, as with any kind of effort to capture homelessness data, are never perfect. So yeah, I think we'll definitely be trying to feed into those pieces of work. Like I say, it's like the work being done by Harriet Watt University, kind of going forward. But it's a good thing to raise, and it's something we're definitely on our radar. It's a very difficult nut to crack.
Can I just add that, because I saw that comment and thought it was a really good one. Something that we're really keen to do, this is obviously our kind of publishing of the survey results, and what one of the things we're really keen to do is identify the areas we need to dig into, or identify the areas where we can do some specific work around, like a particular briefing, like around unmet need, that adds the survey results, some of the data that other people have mentioned in the briefing, and starts to build a more kind of nuanced picture of that. As Leon said, the survey results can only give us so much. So, for example, that could say, okay, do we do a project which is about tracking back to referral agencies as well, who don't answer the survey but can give a picture of what's their unmet need that they're not even passing on to members. So any thoughts and kind of interest on those particular areas, whether it's about the rise in kind of homelessness being caused from evictions from home office accommodation, unmet need, the rise in refugees needing support, for example, we'd be really keen to hear what members are interested in, either us digging into deeper or kind of pulling something, pulling something that's sort of themed for people to use.
Thanks, Bridget. just a couple of questions that have arisen really in response to that, and actually relates very closely to what you were saying, from Salma and John, around how possible and what the kind of method might be for calculating the true levels or scale of destitution in, well, across the UK, but also particularly in sort of dispersal areas or local kind of regions. Any further thoughts, Bridget and Leon, on that?
Just to highlight again Leon's point of we are contributing to Joseph Rowntree Foundation's destitution, their new round of destitution in the UK research, which they've started and which will publish next year. And sort of they are, and we are keen to make sure that migrant homelessness is featured kind of strongly in that to really understand the picture. So that's definitely one of the areas, not the only area. So something we will continue to look into, but just wanted to sort of flag that. It's been conversations and interviews we've already been having with them.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Liam.
No, sorry, just to add on that point. And yeah, really good points raised by Salma and John there. And what you, like you say, Bridget, there isn't that shared methodology nationally. There's some good work going on in London and in different areas, but it really should be something that we'll take forward and push for. And like you say, with the work with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation as well. I think particularly with migrant homelessness, or at least the people that we support within the network, we see a lot of people coming from informal and insecure accommodation. I think that's particularly difficult to pick up in terms of, you know, these efforts to track homelessness figures. Obviously, a lot of it is based on rough sleeping figures, and the rest is estimations. And I think particularly given that we see so many people that are sofa surfing in those informal accommodation setups, it might be particularly difficult. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we haven't seen as much progress, you know, on a national level as we perhaps could have seen, compared to when, you know, if you compare it to kind of rough sleeping estimates and things like that, which are a bit further down the line. But yeah.
Thank you. And I'm aware that there is a bit of chat about this and possible kind of routes into this. And just to say, we do capture this chat, and we'll obviously go away and kind of look in more detail at sort of suggestions and also kind of thoughts generally. So thank you. I just want to move on to a question that Anna posted earlier. And Karen, I'm aware you've had your virtual hand up for a while, so we will come to you. So Anna at Open Door asked what NACCOM might be doing to explore further opportunities for funding or re-granting, like the Respond and Adapt programme that was rolled out during COVID. Bridget, sorry.
Yes, it's definitely on our radar, and I'm not being vague for the purpose of being vague, but just because I don't have a huge amount to say. What I've been doing is having some conversations with funders about how we can facilitate them funding the network. I'm not as bothered about our role, I'm bothered about the money getting to the network. And if we can play a role in doing that, if we can make that easier for funders and they want us to play a role in doing that, then that's great. What I would really like us to do is then have a proper structure in place to manage that. I think that it can be when there's sort of pots of money and then we figure out how to manage it and then they disappear, and then there's a pot of money and we figure out how to manage it. It's not always as helpful, and it doesn't always look as good to kind of funders. So it is something both in terms of conversations with funders and conversations internally, we're looking about, like, you know, is there scope for like a role for, you know, a post that can help manage any re-granting, but also provide some fundraising to support, for example, to members. So, but as I say, the focus at the moment is on understanding funders' kind of appetite for long-term funding, and the priority is getting the funding to members, and what role we should play in that. So, as I say, I'm not being vague for vague's purpose, because I don't, in some ways, we don't have a plan like we want to do this and then we're fitting the funding in. We want to understand how we get the funding out and what's the best role we can play. So, you know, really interested to continue any of those conversations with people. But that's sort of where we're at the moment.
Thank you, Bridget. Karen, we'll come to you, and then Johnny, you've posted a question as well. Karen.
Yeah, actually building on Bridget's response about how we work with funders. So one of the things early on when we were first, I think before we became CIO, so when it was a steering group, one of the members actually felt that we could end up in a bit of a dangerous ground where we're competing with our members in terms of attracting funding. But actually what we've actually found is, and especially with some recent grant awards, is that it's separate pots of funding that are particularly for infrastructure groups. And that's really positive, because it means we can still have those conversations and encourage those funders to support members, and the funding that they're giving us is actually separate. So I think that's a good point to raise. I also forgot to say that in the impact report, there's some work on lived experience. And it was really helpful, I think, to actually break down what kind of roles people with lived experience have got within member groups. So I really like that. And in terms of also, we've got a strategic goal about championing lived experience, and here to support members as well on their journey with engaging people with lived experience in their organisations. NACCOM is also signed up to, I forget what it's actually called, but it's an employment initiative for people with lived experience. And I would encourage member organisations to also get involved in that, because you get opportunities to mentor people and give them support through the application process. And through that, hopefully, the number of people with lived experience in strategic or senior level roles will actually improve over the coming years, hopefully. Is it possible to get a link into that in the chat? Yeah, and I have actually got a question as well. So obviously the impact report has a the number of people that have been housed and the number of nights that people have been housed. I wondered if it's been looked at in terms of working out the average length of stay, and if that has changed over the years. So that was just something that I kind of like picked up when I was reading it, and thought, you know, maybe we could actually include that. Oh, brilliant. Thanks, John. You've posted the link.
Leon, were you going to come back on that?
Yeah. I think it's quite the way that the survey is set up, I guess it makes it a little bit tricky to kind of work out. Obviously, we do have that figure, which is the number of nights accommodation provided. There's a methodology for asking our members to calculate that. I think it's obviously a really kind of interesting point, particularly around, as we mentioned, with, for example, delays in Section 4 applications or Section 95 applications that we're obviously really aware of, and have been kind of talking with ASAP as well in work in that area, and kind of the common challenges that they're seeing as well, and that our members are seeing, and how that might prolong stays within members' accommodation. So I think it's definitely, we can go back and look at the data we've got and see, you know, dig as much as we can into what we have. And it might be we need to do a bit of work outside of the survey again to kind of talk to those members that perhaps have been making more Section 4 referrals or more Section 95, and see, go out to them and ask around the common issues that they're facing, I think. So it'll be probably a combination of, the data we've got, and then doing, you know, a bit of a deeper dive. Obviously, we've now got this data after kind of this summertime, and I'm really excited personally, because it's my role to kind of, really kind of dig deeper into what we have. And obviously in the coming months, conversations like this are really helpful for us to kind of, you know, pinpoint those areas that we're going to do deeper dives into. I think we're talking about producing some short briefings, obviously hoping that the data is going to kind of really back up the rest of community researcher work, and obviously kind of give a platform for future advocacy work as well. So it's great to hear all these kind of points that everyone would kind of like us to dig into, because once the kind of dust settles, then I'll be able to kind of get my teeth into it, and I'm quite excited to do that. And the kind of potentially prolonged stays is definitely something that was on our radar in that context of kind of delays in Home Office decision making.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks, Karen, for your contribution and questions. We're going to just have one final question now, which was posted in the chat by Johnny, who is one of our trustees, around the community research project and work, and how what our plans are for kind of communicating that to as wide an audience as possible. So Finn, I wonder if you can come in on that one.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, by the way, my name is Finn. I didn't speak in the presentation, but I recently started as NACCOM's community research facilitator, so sort of coordinating the community research program. So thanks Johnny for the question, because it's a really important point and a discussion that's very much like live at the moment with us. I think the first thing to say is that we're currently in the process of sort of collaboratively writing up the full report from the research, and that will be launched, as Anne said in her presentation, in a sort of full launch event in early 2023. So definitely sort of watch that space for the launching of those full findings, and sort of alongside that process of sort of refining those findings that the community researchers have made, and producing a report out of that. We're starting to have these discussions about communicating those findings and how they can be put to use. As Cass talked about in his presentation, like a key motivation for the community researchers getting involved was to try and sort of drive change and sort of have more power in that process. So, so that's very much like at the center of the things that we're talking about. And what we're really hoping, I think, is that there were some really quite powerful findings sort of starting to come out around the sort of culture of disbelief and difficulty having evidence believed in people's experiences of having refused asylum claims, and also a sort of general lack of control and over people's own cases in the asylum system due to a lack of knowledge and understanding of a really complex asylum system, and how that creates big difficulties accessing legal support and accessing charity support and those kind of things that are really crucial. We didn't have time to talk about those findings in the presentation today, but those are the sort of themes that are really coming out. And what we're really hoping, I think, is that these can form sort of the basis of a like quite a powerful campaign to be launched in the new year around some of those issues. Exactly what that will look like, who our partners will be in that, and all of that is a very much a live discussion, but it's very much at the forefront of what we're thinking about. And hopefully by the time it launches in the new year, we'll be clearer on that. And please, everyone, do keep an eye out for that launch and the report when it comes out, because it's a really interesting piece of work.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. I think we're going to have to finish there. Sorry, Hannah. Thank you. I'm going to pass on to Johnny just to, and Anne's just going to share her screen to show the results of the trustee voting.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, quick interpretation of votes. So by the looks of this, it appears that Karen, Shukri and Washington have all been re-elected with varying percentages. So firstly, just to say thank you very much for all our members who contribute to this vote. Obviously, it's incredibly important for us in terms of the governance of the organisation, but just also in terms of ensuring that members have a voice within the structures and the governance of NACCOM as a network, and that we're kind of transparent in that process. Secondly, I'm personally delighted that the chair has been re-elected as the vice chair. Obviously, makes my life potentially easier for the next while. And thirdly, I'm delighted that we've been able to retain 3 trustees who've really contributed a great deal to NACCOM over their tenures, and in particular the insights from lived experience that we've been able to bring to the Board of Trustees. So thank you very much to everyone for taking part in the process. I'm going to hand over now, I think, back to Karen, who has a few words just to conclude the kind of AGM dynamic of this morning. So thank you very much, everyone.
Sorry, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, really pleased that, like Johnny, that you've voted us all back in. Just to kind of like reiterate that we didn't have anybody new to propose this year, but over the coming months, we are going to be looking at trustee recruitment, and hopefully maybe some of you want to step up in your involvement to NACCOM. Trying to think what I need to do now. Yeah, and then obviously I've already mentioned Trish and Jochen are going to be moving on, so that gives us some space on the board for new recruitment. So I think the AGM part of the meeting, well, part of the day is now concluded, and we can get off 5 minutes early.
No, we can't.
No, we can't. Oh, sorry.
No, we can't. Stay right where you are, but we're not keeping you for much longer. I thank you very much, everyone, for, as you say, the sort of contributing to really interesting discussions and voting as part of the AGM. When we were thinking about the day, I just want to sort of conclude by saying, when we were thinking about the day, both the in-person event and then the, moving to online, we really thought about like, what do people get from coming to a NACCOM conference? We know that you get much more from kind of your membership, but in terms of coming to a conference, it's really about, hearing about experiences and sharing good practice, learning from each other, sometimes commiserating together. It's about hearing from people with lived experience of, immigration control and destitution. It's about learning about new data, policy, legislation. And it's about connecting and community and solidarity. And, I won't lie, those last bits are a bit harder to replicate online. But what we've really tried to do is build in plenty of discussion time, certainly in the workshops, and had a really good sort of discussion already, but also builds in some time for some sort of, some kind of quiet and listening and reflection. So we're just going to conclude the morning session with that. What I would also like to say just before I do hand over is that, as I said, I'll be staying online for another 10 minutes. So if anyone has any further questions or you need Zoom links or anything like that, just feel free to stay on. But just to introduce the final session, I want to, in a minute, ask a long-term friend of NACCOM, Lorraine Mponela, she's going to do a reading from her new book of poetry, I Was Not Born a Sad Poet. I've already heard Lorraine do a reading and it's absolutely marvelous. So I'm really delighted that she's here today to finish off the morning session, and she'll be doing the same in the afternoon. But what I also wanted to do was just to say that while Lorraine is reading, we will be silent and reflective to honor her words, and also in solidarity with a service of commemoration called Coming Home that's being held by St. Martin in the Fields, Housing Justice and the Museum of Homelessness at pretty much now, to remember the people who have been homeless, who have died over the past year. It is, the work that we do, the area we focus on is really important. And, this is one of the reasons that is really important. The consequences of homelessness and destitution can be devastating at times. And we just want to hold people in our hearts for a moment. So if I can hand over, Lorraine, if you want to just say hello, and then our colleague Katie is going to share an image on the screen for us to sort of concentrate on and think about while Lorraine is doing her reading.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Lorraine from Coventry, and I am representing Hope Projects as well. So yeah, like Bridget has said, I'll be reading from my new book, I Was Not Born a Sad Poet. Thank you. This poem is called The Limbo Land. In limbo land of asylum seeker, I dwell. My beloved landlord, the Home Office, holds my key to wake office. Day after day for 7 years, I wait. They haven't forgotten me. They call me when they wish. Control me like a marionette, dancing to swooshing sounds of letters dropped through the door, and to texts telling me to report or do something else. I'm like a baby they don't want, called far too young to do errands, never brought to the dining table nor celebrated. The key of my coming of age being held tightly in their hands. My breath is controlled by the footsteps outside my room, waiting for my name to be called for a transition to, I don't know where. I spend too much time in my room, afraid that outside I'll betray my fears and let everyone see my silent tears. I have a life, but it's not mine. It's controlled by an amorphous office that decides what I do or do not do. I'm not shackled, but my mind is locked in the eternal battle of when will this nightmare end? I wonder, which shall come first? The loss of my breath or that of my mind? It's so hard living in limbo land. Thank you.
Whew. Thank you very much, Lorraine. That was amazing. I've read it before, but it still takes my breath away. I think we're 2 minutes over, but it was well worth it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the morning session of our event. We'll give you at least half an hour to have a break from the screen, get some fresh air, get a cuppa, and a sweet biscuit, hopefully. Or maybe I'm just telling you my menu. As I say, I will stay online for another 10 minutes. And if anyone's got any questions, they need to know their Zoom links for their workshops, please do let me know. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing all of you at the workshops at 11:30 and then at the afternoon session at 2 o'clock, which will end with another reading by Lorraine. And I'm sure now you will all definitely be there. Hannah has also, or will also, be putting the link in the chat to Lorraine's book. I would very much recommend having a look and getting it. I know it's certainly going to be on my list for presents to family and friends and colleagues, shouldn't have said that, this Christmas. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you later.